भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय। पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय, पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय, पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय,
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय।
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय,
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय।
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय,
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय।
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय,
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय।
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय,
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय।
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय,
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय।
जय जय शिव जी की जय जय,
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय।
जय जय शिव जी की जय जय,
भोले की जय जय, शिव जी की जय जय।
की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय,
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय।
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय,
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय।
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय,
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवाय।
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा।
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवाय।
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवाय।
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा।
शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा।
शिव शंभो शंभो, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवाय।
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवाय।
हर 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 महादेवा, शिव शंभो महादेवा,
हर ओम नमः शिवाय।
हर ओम हर ओम हर ओम भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय
ओ
जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पते शिव जी की जय जय
पार्वती पत शिव जी की जय जय
शिव शंभो शंभो शिव शंभो महादेवा
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 हर 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 महादेवा शिव शंभो महादेवाय
हर 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 महादेवा शिव शंभो महादेवा
हर ओम नमः शिवाय
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 गुरु ओम नमः शिवाय
गुरु ओम नमः शिवाय
हर ओम नमः शिवाय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
भोले की जय जय शिव जी की जय जय
ओम Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Welcome. What beautiful kirtan tonight. So beautiful. I really dislike my coworkers. The questions in satsang always span this really, really beautiful gamut from the most etheric, esoteric, philosophical levels of birth and death and rebirth and the soul, to the nitty-gritty of living here in a body on planet Earth. And it's all good. I always say there's no wrong question or stupid question or anything like that. As long as it's something that matters deeply to you. Because when we speak about being in the presence of truth, being in that awareness, if there is something blocking me from living in my divine truth of who I am, whether it's some aspect of the soul that just isn't making sense and I can't make it fit, or whether it's the annoying person in the cubicle next door, and everything in between. If it's keeping me from living in that awareness of truth, of love, of divinity, then it matters. It's important. And it's much more important than an esoteric philosophical question that doesn't actually have anything to do with my heart, but that I mulled over for a few hours trying to think of what would sound very intellectually impressive. So I really dislike my coworkers. They don't do anything unless it serves them, but they demand everything. Anybody know people like that? I try to stay in my little bubble and just do my work, but I get so filled with resentment. I know it's me, but I have such a hard time not feeling frustrated with the situation. So there's an interesting psychological teaching. Some of you may know I have an academic background in psychology that has been very happily replaced almost with a deep love of, a deep immersion in spirituality. But every once in a while, something will pop back up from the field of psychology that's relevant. And there's a teaching in psychology that which bothers me the most about other people is that which actually bothers me the most about myself, but that I'm not looking at. Lots of people do lots of annoying things. The world is full of people behaving in all sorts of ways that our cultured brains, our brains full of values and ethics and all of that, we can look around and every minute we can point fingers at all of the different things people are doing. But interestingly, most of them don't sting us so deeply that I can't do my work, or I can't sleep at night, or my food doesn't digest. And so when certain behaviors do, or certain people do, it's always interesting to look in. For me, emotional triggers are actually wonderful because they're doorways. If you don't get wrapped up in them, they're doorways. We're always looking for doorways into ourself. How do I grow? How do I learn? How do I clear my karmic story? How do I free myself from this drama? And it's one thing to just sit quietly in meditation and go within. That's one doorway. And other doorways present themselves to us as we move through our world. And one of the biggest doorways is something that someone does that bothers me so much I can't sleep or eat or do my work. Because normally people's annoying habits, difficult personalities, are just mildly annoying. They're not the sort of thing that works us up so much inside that I'm overcome by them. And so when it does happen, it's a beautiful opportunity. Don't be hard on yourself. Yes, as the questioner says, I know it's me. Yeah, of course it's you. But that's not a bad thing. It's a doorway into your psychological drama, which the more we understand it, the freer we can get of it. And so if what you notice is people aren't doing, and their lack of doing bothers me so much. So there's a couple of reasons why that would bother me. One, of course, is the purest reason. Because the work is of such vital importance that it absolutely must get done. And that's possible. It's certainly possible that we are so deeply committed to every aspect of work that is being done in our company, in our organization, in our community, in our ashram, wherever it may be, so deeply committed to every aspect of it, that anything not getting done immediately troubles me deeply. But that's rare. And of course, the answer to that frequently is if it troubles me so much, I could just do it. Right? I mean, you think about things that are life and death matters. If I'm a surgeon, for example, and my attending doctor or nurse isn't doing what they're supposed to do, am I going to stand there over a person cut wide open and anesthetized and just seethe that this incompetent nurse isn't doing what she should do? Of course not. I'm just going to do it. Because ultimately, saving the life of the person on the table is much more important than seething at the incompetent nurse. And the same thing is true in general in life. So one option is that I'm disturbed because I am so purely, deeply committed to every aspect of work we're doing, not just what I'm doing, but what this one's doing and that one's doing, that it pains me to know that their work isn't getting done. But that's pretty rare. A much more probable explanation is, what is it about other people's laziness or other people's ineptitude or other people's lack of caring or indifference that is bringing up for me something about myself? Would I like to be more lazy than I am? But for whatever reason, I have a particular personality style and a particular psychological makeup that believes that I've got to produce, and only then I'm worthy. And so I don't have the luxury, perhaps, to slack off and take a late lunch or a long lunch. And so watching other people do it brings up for me my own stuff? Or is it that I'm actually so afraid of my own inner inclination toward laziness that I'm terrified of and repulsed by this aspect of myself? And so I'm repulsed by it in others. So either way, whatever it is, these triggers, use them as doors. If you make it all about the coworker or the family member, the in-law, the neighbor, whoever it is that's just annoying me to death, if I make it all about them, I've missed the point. There's something in there for me to learn. And I need to look within and figure out what it is. But the other last aspect of this is just the basic aspect of common human nature, which is I'm much more wrapped up in what other people are doing than looking at myself. It's much easier to point my finger at other people and saying they're not doing what they should be doing than to look at myself, either my actions or my desires. So whether I'm actually being lazy or I'm just desiring to be lazy, either way, whether I'm actually incompetent or just terrified of being incompetent, it's a lot easier to point the finger at other people. So whenever you find yourself sitting in judgment or seething in judgment, as happens to most of us, ask yourself, what am I avoiding here? What is it that is going on in me now that I'm avoiding? And that being so wrapped up in what they're doing, so annoyed, is keeping me from looking at myself. And just use it as yet another opportunity to meditate. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to face anybody else in a mirror. At the end of the day, it's never about what somebody else did. Nobody on their deathbed ever says, yeah, God, I really wish I had given him a piece of my mind. I've never heard of anyone, ever, at any point looking back on their life saying, yeah, God, I wish I had really told her off for being so lazy and incompetent. The regrets we have are, God, I wish I had had the courage to look at myself more clearly. I wish I had had the courage to not be always judging and negative about other people, to always be pointing the finger at other people. I wish I had had the courage to allow positivity in, to allow love in. Because this is also just a defense mechanism. It's just a simple way of staying out of the truth of the moment. If I can be in my head, if I can be judging and condemning and negative, well, I don't have to be here now. I don't have to be in this breath. I don't have to step up to the possibility of the truth of who I am. When we're really living in light, our light, God's light, divine light, light of enlightenment, it's not that we don't notice problems, but it's that our way of dealing with them is very different. There's a beautiful story about Ramakrishna Paramahansa, who one day his disciples were looking for him. They went into the temple, they went to the ashram, and they couldn't find him. And so they wander in the street, and they're looking for him. They can't find him. Finally, someone points them to this meadow. And they see him lying in the grass in the meadow. And he's surrounded by all these bunny rabbits. And he's making noises. The bunny rabbits are just there. And he's making noises, and the bunny rabbits are there. And after a few minutes, the bunny rabbits all scurry away. And a whole bunch of snakes come. And the disciples are just about to run in and try to save him and scare away the snakes, when they see all the snakes just stop, like 2-3 feet from where he's lying in the grass. And he starts making sounds again. And the devotees are just standing there watching this. And after some time, the snakes go away, and Sri Ramakrishnaji stands up, and the disciples say to him, what was going on over there? And he says, well, see, the snakes were eating the bunny rabbits. And I understand that the snakes need to eat food because they also have to live, but they were killing way too many bunny rabbits than they actually needed to survive. And so I had to navigate this truce between the bunny rabbits and the snakes, and teach the bunny rabbits how to avoid the snakes a little bit better, and teach the snakes how to be more compassionate and less greedy beings here. And once I had done that, I'm now going back to the temple. And I love that story for innumerable reasons. But there was a problem. There were creatures acting out of what we would call dharma. And he wasn't going to stand by and just let them do it. His intervention was required. But the intervention was not sitting in the temple or the ashram complaining to the disciples, oh my God, you know those snakes, I can't believe it. Like, look at them. They're greedy, they're violent. Clearly they don't know about ahimsa. Here they are just killing all these bunny rabbits. No. He did what was needed. Now, granted, he had a capacity to problem solve that particular issue, perhaps a little more skillfully than we could have. But that's what being in the light, dealing with creatures who are perhaps not acting according to what we think is right, what it looks like. It doesn't look so much like me sitting there seething, unable to work, frustrated, annoyed, overcome by it. That's just me allowing myself to be pulled out of the truth of the moment by drama. And we have to be a little bit more stringent with ourselves. Gentle, compassionate, but also stringent. Because the mind, the ego, they want to pull us constantly toward that which is easy, that which is familiar. And for a lot of us, our way of thinking that is negative, that is judgmental, that is drama, that's what's familiar. And it does take a little bit of a tight grip on the reins of our mind, the reins of our attention, to keep it on track. You know that if you meditate. If every time your mind wanders, you just go with it, well, there goes your meditation. The mind never comes back on its own. It only comes back when you grab it back. The sooner the better. The faster the better. So the same thing is true in life. When the mind is wandering into judgment, into negativity, into drama, just grab it back. And of course, if there's something you can learn along the way about yourself, do it. It's a doorway. But don't allow yourself to get wrapped up in it. Time is much too precious here. Are there any questions that anyone here has tonight? Yes.
There are two lines. First is love what you do, and second is do what you love. So which one we should choose?
Should we try to love what we do or do what we love? Both. This is how much of my current situation is in my hands, how much of it is not in my hands. Basically, a really good rule of life is that wonderful saying that says, "Oh God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." So if I don't love what I do, and I can change it, by all means, change it. But be sure that your love is not just a momentary, temporary fascination or enjoyment. Because then you're going to find yourself changing jobs every week. And this is true in relationships. This is true in so many aspects of our life. If you can change something about your situation that you are not loving, change it. There's no There's no spiritual teaching that says, thou art be miserable. Thou shalt be miserable. It is more spiritual to be miserable than to be happy. There's no teaching like that. Thou shalt suffer. I've never heard a teaching from the scriptures where God says that. Thou shalt hate every minute of thy life. I mean, can you imagine? Of course not. The scriptures are filled with teachings of courage, of stepping up to the plate of our life, of fulfilling our dharma. So, by all means, do what you love, but be very careful that when you're using the concept of what you love, that it's not the flavor of the moment. Because again, the ego in the mind is very fickle. And it will give you all sorts of reasons to stop loving. Whether it's a class in school, it's harder than you thought it would be, a teacher who isn't so nice to you, somebody who sits next to you in class who, for whatever reason, brings up things and you really don't want to be in that class. Or maybe it's a class that takes place at the same time as your favorite TV show and you'd actually rather be at home watching TV than in class. But the mind will create all sorts of rationalizations. Oh, it's a bad class, bad teacher, you don't need it, obsolete knowledge. You're meant for something different, useless information. Our mind will come up with all kinds of reasons. This job is beneath you. One day, your boss asks you to do something that's a little hard, or maybe doesn't praise you the way you'd like, maybe even scolds you a bit. Maybe suddenly you've got a coworker who's really smart, really good. It brings up all kinds of issues for you. Whatever it may be. But the mind is going to tell you, oh, stupid job, bad company. Boss doesn't know what he's doing. I should be doing something better. And so then you find a different job. And then, of course, something happens there. You're passed over for a promotion that you thought you should get. The colleagues in the workroom go out for lunch and they don't invite you. Whatever it may be. You make a comment in a board meeting that was not so smart. Somebody shuts you down. And again, the mind, instead of dealing with actually what comes up for these things, says, oh, stupid job, don't like this job, gotta find something that's better for me. I'm not fulfilling my potential. This company is better, they're moving much faster. They know where it's at. Then you keep moving. We do that with jobs, we do that with relationships. We do it with so much. So be really careful. People do it with gurus. They do it with all sorts of traditions, yogic traditions, religious traditions. Somebody doesn't butter me up the way I want to be buttered up, doesn't tell me I'm quite as perfect as I think I am. Points out a little bit of my ego to me that I don't necessarily really quite want to see. Oh, he's corrupt, she's corrupt, whatever. This is how the human mind works. So just before you leave your job, be really careful that this is not an ego reaction to something, but that it really is in alignment with you having a love that you can fulfill and that you can fulfill in a meaningful way, and you know what that is. And that it's not just that the current job is too much work, they're forcing you to be more responsible than you'd like, they're forcing you to show up on time, you're kind of a late sleeper, they want you there at 8, you'd rather a job that started at 11. Just be careful, because we lose a lot of really beautiful opportunities that the universe gives us, not just career opportunities, but growth opportunities in life. Because our ego talks us out of it. So be careful about that. But otherwise, if you're really sure it's not right for you, it's not who you are, absolutely no rule that you have to convince yourself how to love it. If you have the capacity to be doing something else that you do love, then do it. But if not, this is where the serenity part comes in. So give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. There are aspects of our life that we cannot change. We cannot go back and rewrite our childhoods. Cannot change your family of blood. Cannot change a lot of aspects of our physical body. Some of it we can change, but lots of it we can't. Can't rewrite however many decades of life we've already spent creating different karma. That's the stuff we get the serenity for. That's the stuff we learn to love. Or if you don't actually love it, love what you are learning through it. Love how you are growing through it. Love how you are blossoming through it. And if it's something you can change, that's where we have the courage to change. Because a lot of times we should make a change, but we don't. You see this a lot in women who are in relationships where they're being abused. Women who absolutely should change the situation. But for whatever reason, they don't. They can't. In many cases, they can't. And then the wisdom, of course, to know the difference. So that's where we meditate. It's to understand internally which aspects of this are the fruits of my karma, and I'm really meant to just learn to love it, or learn to love what I'm learning from it, learn to love how I'm growing through it. Which aspects of it are the stuff that is molding me into who I'm supposed to be? You know, I frequently describe being a disciple of a guru like being a lump of clay on a potter's wheel, where it doesn't always feel good. Potters don't always take their clay and go, let me ever so gently and lovingly smooth you into the vase you're supposed to be, or the bowl you're supposed to be. They take that lump of clay and they throw it onto a wheel, and the wheel spins around, and every once in a while they whack it. And then they take it and they throw it in the fire. But at the end of the day, you end up with something that's not only useful but beautiful. But it hasn't felt great all along the way. And so it's important to be able to have the clarity of knowing which of these situations are situations that I am absolutely supposed to change. Because really my stepping up to the plate is in having the courage to change this situation. And which situations are there where my stepping up to the plate is having the courage to sit there while I'm in the fire. The courage that the caterpillar has while it's being liquefied to be turned into a butterfly. And how to know. And that's where the wisdom comes in. And that wisdom, it's not something that there's an equation for, it's not something there's a cookie cutter answer for, but it's something that internally we have to know. And we do know. You know, Pujya Swamiji always talks about our internal GPS. And as long as we can make wisdom be the one behind the wheel, or if we don't feel like we have enough wisdom yet, let us put seeking behind the wheel, yearning behind the wheel, humility behind the wheel, surrender behind the wheel, and just make sure that ego stays belted up in its seat in the back. And eventually we'll find the way. But ideally, the more you can learn to love whatever situation you're in, the better you're going to be. Not in a resigned way, not in a defeatist way, but simply in the way of wherever we are, it's perfect. This moment, this minute, wherever I am, it's perfect. How can I love this moment? Because my ability to love this moment is what lays the seeds for my ability to love the next moment. And the moment after that. Chances are, if I'm miserable right now, I'm going to be miserable 5 minutes from now. And miserable tomorrow. So the more I can learn how to love in this moment, chances are I'm going to be in love 5 minutes from now. And tomorrow. So we have time for one more question, if there is. Yes.
What is the difference between genius and intellectual?
The difference between genius and intellectual. On what level for you? I mean, granted that these days we've all got Google on our phones, and that you could simply look up genius and then look up intellectual and see the difference. We won't go there. But on what level does that distinction matter to you? Are you genius or are you intellectual?
Intellectual solve problem, genius prevent them.
So which one are you?
It's not my judgment, my action.
Which would you like to be?
I like to be part of genius.
You'd like to be genius. Great. Well, here's the thing about what I know about geniuses. And this is true whether it's Mozart to Einstein to anyone in between. It's not something they learned. Pieces of it they may have learned. Someone may have given Einstein the building block equations that he used. Someone at some point taught him 2 + 2. I did hear he failed out of math, but at some point along the way, someone taught him a few building block equations. At some point, Mozart probably had a piano teacher who showed him something. But very quickly, geniuses fly past anyone who has taught them anything, which means that they are getting it from inside. And so if we want to be a genius on any level, we can only get there by going inside.
As you think, so you become.
Exactly. So therefore, what is it that's keeping you from being a genius?
I like a company like you people, it's automatically speaking.
Wonderful. Good. So welcome. It's actually a beautiful pronouncement to conclude with, that being in the company of satsang makes him feel like a genius. And what I love about that is, as we say, literally satsang means in the presence of truth. So a genius is one who in whatever field has access to a connection to a truth, a wisdom that is not on this plane. Mozart's genius was not about the scales. Einstein's genius was not about mathematical equations. Mozart used the piano keys as a way of sharing his genius. Einstein gave us equations as a way of understanding his genius. But the mark of real genius is that tapping into a level of truth that comes from a completely different place, that comes from within, but is not of us within, but is of us tapping into just a source of wisdom, of sound, of truth. And ultimately, that's what satsang is. So if you feel like a genius here, then it's working. Wonderful. So, as I mentioned last night, I will be out from tomorrow for the next 6 days. So tomorrow's the 6th. I will be back on the 12th. So we will not have satsang from tomorrow through the 11th, but we will start again on the 12th, which is actually a week from today. So what day of the week is it today? Thursday? Is today Thursday? So we start again with satsang next Thursday. Wonderful. Have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful week, everyone.